When it comes to discussion around Dragon Ball Super, a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on the series. Some people say it's the best Dragon Ball we've ever had. Those people normally tend to be the new fans. Some people say that it's the worst Dragon Ball we've ever had. Those people tend to be some of the oldest Dragon Ball fans. Some people say it's a subpar sequel. Some people say it's a cash grab. Some people say it just downright sucks and should never have been made. I have a unique take on Dragon Ball Super in that I like it, but it's missing something that Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z both had, and this is the reason why Dragon Ball Super failed. Now, I don't think it failed commercially or financially. I think Dragon Ball Super definitely did a lot in terms of making enough money for the franchise to continue, considering there was a long hiatus. And that was probably in part due to Toriyama refusing to be involved for a while, and Dragon Ball GT failing. They probably said, hey, we probably shouldn't touch this property or else we're going to mess it up even more unless we have Toriyama on board. Then, of course, we all know that Toriyama got involved with Dragon Ball again once the Dragon Ball movie failed. Dragon Ball Evolution was a train wreck, so Toriyama came back. He did Battle of Gods, he did Resurrection F, and then he came back for Super. Of course, we know that he didn't write Super in depth like we know he did with the movies. When it comes to Battle of Gods, Resurrection F, Dragon Ball Super Broly, and Dragon Ball Super Superhero, Toriyama is credited for the scripts entirely. And when it comes to Super, the anime and the manga, they normally have a rough understanding of what he does. Most of the time, it's listed as outlines, and then it really differs from arc to arc. Sometimes Toyotaro says that he took the reins. Sometimes he says that Toriyama took the reins. And we also do see some instances whenever Toriyama has to do corrections on Toyotaro's artwork where he feels like he needs to be corrected. But it tends, for the most part, to be Toriyama does the rough outlines or the rough draft or the rough concept, and then they're fleshed out by either Toei or Toyotaro. And this is where the issues with Dragon Ball Super come into play. When you had Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z, there was a lot of heart in the series. Now, you may not know this if you haven't seen Dragon Ball, so I'm going to try to speak to the Dragon Ball Z crowd, but please watch Dragon Ball if you haven't. But Dragon Ball Z has a lot of heart. You have people dying with emotions involved. We know they're going to be revived later, but there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of baggage. You know that, like, it's built up and properly handled with character arcs. For example, Piccolo died whenever he faced down Nappa in order to save Gohan. That was a big redemptive moment for his character. Then, in Dragon Ball Super, whenever they were recapping the Frieza arc of the Dragon Ball Z movie, Piccolo sacrifices himself in a callback moment that was mainly for nostalgia, that did nothing, and then he was brought back off screen. That was not a good moment, and that feeds into the problem that Dragon Ball Super had, which is it had no heart, so it tried to rely on your nostalgia for Dragon Ball Z. And because it had no heart, it was not willing to take big risks on big characters. So you saw this after the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F movies were recapped in Super. They went on to do some new stuff, which was a tournament. And the tournament had no actual villains. They were just characters that were antagonists with different viewpoints from another universe. But they weren't really super villains. The closest thing you got was Frost, but he wasn't really a villain. He was just a scumbag. And then you had the Goku Black arc, which was super hype and super interesting. And that was the only time the anime actually introduced a new villain. And what did they do with him? They really dropped the ball on the whole story. I was really a fan of the Goku Black arc until the end, whenever the whole timeline got erased. And then they just said, oh no, let's go to this other timeline. Bye, Trunks. Like, that was the perfect excuse to have the future Trunks to just stay around in this timeline. Sure, his future would have been erased and that still would have sucked, but at least he would have been around in the main timeline as a character that we see recur. But no, they just sent him back to a timeline identical to his own, and he feels like a failure, and that's that. So that fed into the problem of it having no heart, because they kind of just dropped the ball on everything after they attempted to have some heart in the story, after they attempted to have consequences and stakes. Because the problem is, you can't build up all of that and have those consequences and introduce these stakes and then say, well, that's all out of the window. you wanted big stakes and big consequences. How about the universe dying? I think there's a certain point whenever the stakes are so high, and when it comes to Dragon Ball, you can't just say, okay, this is all gone now, so the timeline that you fought for this whole time is gone. What are we supposed to be rooting for now? Like, that just was not a satisfying conclusion. And then you go on to the Tournament of Power saga. And of course, I've said this plenty of times before, I think it's overrated. In fact, whenever I first watched Dragon Ball Super as it was airing weekly, this arc was the moment where I actually took a pause from watching Super. I know that sounds crazy because a lot of people say this is the most hype arc. A lot of people really tuned into it and they say they really enjoyed it. Honestly, this is whenever I felt like the story was at its weakest. I mean, that's not even counting the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F movie recaps, but the Tournament of Power, it was promising at first and it was interesting, and I liked the small character moments you got with characters like Gohan, but it really didn't have a main villain. It didn't have a driving focus. The whole theme was the universes are being erased, and the ending was so predictable. I remembered whenever Android 17 was still in the ring, and I knew that he was going to come back, and I knew that the wish was going to be to bring all the universes back. The most interesting thing it did was end with Frieza being revived, and that was interesting, but they still haven't done anything with that. And they are probably going to do something with that with the Black Frieza arc and the new Dragon Ball Super manga arc. But yeah, this was mainly about my gripes with the Dragon Ball Super anime. It's got problems. I did enjoy it, but I think the biggest problem was that it had no heart. It wasn't willing to take risks. It wasn't willing to develop characters meaningfully. It was more concerned with being nostalgic. And then we got past the anime, and whenever we went into the manga, that's whenever I started to enjoy Dragon Ball Super way more. They were calling back to things like Namek, but actually connecting them to character moments, like with Vegeta whenever he wants to make up for his sins against the Namekians by fighting for them against Moro. Moro having connections to Buu, the God Key being introduced with Oob. That was building on what came before, but making us go closer to the end of Z with characters like Oob and Buu and their God Key and the Grand Supreme Kai. And then going into the Granola arc, I know a lot of people have some opinions about the Granola arc that it's bad, but I actually really enjoyed it. And I love how they connected it more toward Bardock, the Saiyans and their sins, and the survivors that are left behind. It was a little bit of a riff on what Dragon Ball GT did with Baby, but I love how they handled Granola differently. If you've ever seen Vinland Saga, I look at Granola like a Thorfinn figure, and I love the way Granola's character concluded, with him choosing to stay by Monaito and try to tend to him rather than attempt to take his revenge against Gas. And then of course you end with Black Frieza, and it was pretty exciting. So I think it's interesting that whenever Toei was the main driving force with the anime, I felt like it lacked heart and vision. But it seems like Toyotaro and Toriyama are more tightly connected, because whenever I read the Dragon Ball Super manga, I get a more sense of heart, and I get like Toyotaro's actually trying to develop these characters. And then of course I liked Dragon Ball Super Broly and Dragon Ball Super Superhero, which were of course scripted by Toriyama. And that about does it whenever it comes to this video's whole concept of why Dragon Ball Super failed. I'm mainly talking about the anime, and the manga I think is actually doing a better job. And then of course we have Dragon Ball DAIMA just around the corner. That is reportedly going to have multiple scripts by Toriyama, and that it's going to have him more hands-on, and it's going to feel more classic Dragon Ball. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I just wanted to get this video made just to kind of put my opinion out there on why Dragon Ball Super failed. I could talk about the art and all the issues with that, but I think that's been driven to the ground. This video I just wanted to discuss the narrative issues that I had. And I'm probably going to make more videos, more in-depth, maybe through each arc about the specific issues I had with each one. But for now, I just wanted to make a broad scope video of why the anime failed to really live up to the hype that Dragon Ball Z was. And that's not even, if you compare this to Dragon Ball, it falls even shorter in terms of a narrative department, in terms of a character department. It just does not live up to it. Now, one thing I will give Dragon Ball Super credit for, and again, this isn't supposed to be a Dragon Ball Super hate train, like I said, I liked it, I didn't love it, but it was Dragon Ball back, so I'm definitely blinded by nostalgia in that regard. But whenever you look at Dragon Ball Super, one thing I really respected it for was bringing some of that classic Dragon Ball comedy back into the Dragon Ball series. Because if you look at Dragon Ball Z, they kind of took out that comedy for the most part. It was still there, but not as much. So I was really appreciative of Dragon Ball Super for bringing back that classic comedy that we got in the classic Dragon Ball series. But yeah, guys, we're going to end the video here. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment down below, and please subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with all things Dragon Ball news and commentary. This video, of course, was more of a commentary video because Dragon Ball news has been a bit dry as of late. But yeah, I just wanted to get this video made just to let you guys know Dragon Ball Super had some problems. We know it had some problems. And the reason why it failed, I think, like I said, is a lack of heart. It definitely needed a more cohesive vision and a more satisfying conclusion to its arcs. Definitely actually needed some characters that are villains because, like I said, both tournaments had no villains. They were just antagonists that were pretty boring and not fleshed out at all. And then you had the Goku Black arc, which honestly was a good attempt, but they really dropped the ball and did not land the ending, and it kind of soured the rest of the arc overall. But yeah, guys, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace off.